What surprised you about working in state government?
Well, it's been really interesting because I went on this show before the session.
Yeah, I remember.
And one of the things that I thought was going to be really a hot topic was Ferguson issues. And it turned out that we did not have nearly as much debate and nearly as many bills on those issues coming forth on the floor as I thought. And that was really surprising to me.
Why do you think that was?
I think there wasn't a lot of consensus on some of the issues like body cameras. I think there's a lot of questions still about whether or not we should have any kind of a unfunded mandate on police departments across the state on that. The question of funding, I think, might end up at the federal level. There's some talk, I know, from the federal government to fund body cameras. The use of force bill, that was really disappointing to see that not get across the finish line. Hopefully we can look forward to working with the senator on that next year and getting a good bill on that passed.
Was there enthusiasm on the part of your fellow Republicans for any of these issues?
I think the use of force bill is something, it did pass the House, it just didn't make it because of the filibuster that happened.
Would it have passed if there was a chance it would get taken up in the Senate, as we just heard? Do you think you think it would have still passed if they knew it could be of any consequence?
I think it would have.
Is that the way you saw it, sitting in the same chamber?
I sit in the same chamber when the Speaker of the House came and spoke at the beginning of the session, and he said no Ferguson agenda. When he spoke about law enforcement, every single Republican got up and applauded tremendously for law enforcement. This was a Republican Party that came into session trying to take the law enforcement lobby from the Democrats, and they would do whatever they can to make sure that they did everything that law enforcement wanted and nothing that the protesters and the people of Ferguson and the people in St. Louis County wanted. That's what I saw, and I saw that from day one. I saw it play out in the committee, played out on the floor, and it even played out with the use of force bill on the last day of session. In that bill, it says that you can use deadly use of force to effect an arrest. I don't know how you arrest a dead person, but using deadly force and passing a bill allowing law enforcement to kill people to arrest them does not sound like something that is going to get any consensus at all, or even make it through the Senate.
What can make it through the Senate?
Well, I do believe that if we were allowed to go to conference on the deadly force bill, we would have been able to take out all of the nuclear language that was in there. What was important is that we updated our statutes. We had not done that. There was a change with the U.S. Supreme Court, not only in 1985, but then again in 1989 with the terminology usage of objective reasonableness, which is what Justice Rehnquist wanted. That's what we were able to get into that language of deadly force.
Get into line with the federal standard.
Absolutely, and we were able to do that leaving the Senate, and because of the blockage and the shenanigans in the last 4 days of session, we were not only able to get to a conference committee on the deadly force bill to take out all of the nuclear language, but there are many bills that should have been passed that were not.
Shenanigans on whose part? Are you calling out your own party?
I'm calling out everyone because there's no other Senate district that has as many problems as mine. We have the Westlake landfill, 46,000 tons of uranium. I have 2 unaccredited school districts, Riverview and Normandy, and then I have #Ferguson. And so I was definitely committed more than most people, and we had a lot of support from senators, rural and urban. When it came to Ferguson legislation, we were able to pass out 4 pieces of legislation, or 3 pieces of legislation from the Senate to go to the House, but only one of them finished and ended up on the governor's desk. But I do feel that we missed a unique opportunity. And when I talk about shenanigans, the Republican Party should have known. If the governor was going to veto a bill and they did not have enough votes to override the governor's veto, then something was going to happen.
Talking about right to work.
The right to work bill. And obviously that is a very important bill to debate on the Senate floor and on the House floor. But again, if you know that the governor is going to veto that bill and there are not enough votes to override that veto, I'm trying to figure out, are the Republicans playing checkers or are they playing chess? And it looks like in the last week of session, the Republican Party was playing chess.
So What happened? You listed a lot of things that you'd like to have seen done just in your district. There are a lot of, I'm sure everyone else feels similarly about their own. What's the problem? Where was the lack of functionality, or was there a lack of functionality?
I think you have to look at it from both sides. There was good legislation that didn't get passed. On the other hand, there was a lot of bad legislation that didn't get passed. I know last year there was a lot of controversy over the so-called Friday favors, which passed on the last day, and I just know it's very common for the legislature in past years to get through these huge bills where they basically ask members of the House, okay, vote on this now and then find out what's in it later. So we didn't have that happen. So I thought from a process standpoint, it was good. You hate to see things shut down, but sometimes it might be a little bit better than passing bad bills.
Well, what happened was we cut back on a lot of the decades of good legislation that has made this state and the country great. For some reason, right to work is still coming up. For some reason, we're cutting back unemployment benefits. For some reason, we're cutting back TANF benefits for those that need it the most. So this year, I realized as a state representative, I was reminded I grew up poor. I grew up in the city of St. Louis. I grew up with not a lot. And everything that has been cut back, and that's not doing anything on Medicaid expansion, I would not be a state representative. I would not be here today if it weren't some of the programs that the Republicans are cutting back and have made it a point to cut back when they have 117 members. That's what happened. What happened is that we passed a lot of tax credits and tax deductions for business, and we cut back on benefits for the poor.
They get 117 members. Go ahead, Representative.
We actually didn't pass nearly as many tax credits as we have in past sessions. And I think with the welfare reform bill, what we did is basically caught up with what 49 of the other states have been doing. We were ranked 50th in a Heartland Institute study, 50th in terms of getting on board with the 1996 welfare reform law, which requires people to look for work if they're going to get government benefits. That's common sense. That's something that Bill Clinton, I think it's really interesting the way that your party has moved so far left. I wonder if Bill Clinton could win a Democratic nomination now.
I don't legislate based on the Heartland Institute.
And I have to tell you, it was actually a Democrat who wrote the legislation that the President Clinton, passed, and that was Joe Maxwell. And so President Clinton took the language from Joe Maxwell, the former lieutenant governor, and that's what became welfare reform. So it did start with a Democrat.
So is there a larger question here about, for one, they have 117 members, as you mentioned, so there are a lot of people in the state, presumably, that agree with the legislation they're passing. Is there something to be said about the way it's functioning, though?
I have to tell you, I've been in the building for 15 years, and I worked for the former lieutenant governor, and I have always been on the Senate side with the exception of my 3 terms in the House, and never have I seen a last week of session that looked like this. There was never a time where the Senate shut down all conversation, all debate, and what happened is that taxpayers in the state of Missouri were cheated. They were literally cheated from Democrats and Republicans because, yes, there were some good bills that were out there. I know I had a nursing home bill that I've been trying to pass for 8 years now, and there are some bad bills that were out there too. But every single bill deserved to have a debate. And when we shut down the Senate process, what we have been doing for the 15 years I've been in the building, that really destroyed the integrity that taxpayers in Missouri are really asking for.
Functionally as well, there was not a lot of input on the budget. This was the first time I've ever seen, and I'm sure first time in a very long time, that there were no changes to the budget on the House floor. With over 100 members in the Republican Party, not one wanted to put in anything for their districts on the House floor. So that means that just a few people, just the House leadership, and from what I hear, not even everybody on the Budget Committee got to shape the $24 billion budget that we have. So just a few people are spending all of our tax dollars, and we're not getting any input from those that need it most. And let me remind you that we're cutting the budget for the poor people that need it most all across the state. I thought functionally that was a very surprising move to rush through the budget process, not let everybody weigh in, and just let a few people decide for everyone.
And Michael's right. In that budget, I actually wrote a letter to the governor, and I told him about all of the pork projects that were in the budget, several pork items, and I was concerned about that because I was also asking for $1 million for people in the Ferguson community for mental health services because they had not gotten them. And not only did I not get that $1 million, but in House Bill 12, there was $775,000 that went to the Ferguson Commission, and we still don't know how they're utilizing money. And then there was another $2 million that went to a park in Kansas City. While we're dealing with people who are not getting an adequate education, we're dealing with mental health services for a community that has been traumatized and injured in multiple ways, I could not get $1 million, and that's just tragic. So while there was pork, and I wrote this to the governor, there was a lot of examples of pork going to special projects, a farmer's $250,000 going to a farmer's market. The farmer's market around my block, around my house, has been in existence since 1973. Why are we establishing a new fund for $250,000 for a farmer's market in Jefferson City? That just doesn't make sense.